So Chris comes to us from a colleague, Cheryl Kaiser, who's at Babson, a professor, and about 8, 9, 10 weeks ago, maybe early in the semester, she said, "You gotta get Chris up here, he's a Middlebury grad." And so we're so glad you're here. He is an executive director of public policy and corporate responsibility at Verizon, where he's responsible for developing and implementing Verizon's corporate responsibility strategy. Verizon's goal is to deploy the transformational power of its broadband and wireless networks to create long-term value for its shareholders and the communities it serves. We're going to hear more about this. Creating business and community value is what Verizon calls shared success, with 3 focus areas: shared solutions, shared service, and shared sustainability. After graduating from Middlebury in 1983, Chris began his career with New England Telephone. He's held numerous positions in the accounting, real estate operations, engineering, and human resources departments at Verizon's predecessor companies, including New England Telephone, Bellport, NYNEX, and Bell-Atlantic. For 13 years, he's managed environmental and safety issues. In 2004, he joined Verizon's Public Affairs, Policy, and Communications team in Washington, D.C. In addition to his BA from Middlebury in European History and German, he has a JD from Suffolk University Law School and an MBA from Northeastern University, as well as a certificate in environmental management and policy from Yale, their School of Forestry and Environmental Studies. Chris is a member of the Massachusetts Bar, and he and his wife, Mary Ellen, have 3 children. Welcome, Chris.
Well, thank you very much, John and Jada and Liz, and I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. I think the work that you're all doing here at the center is really important in terms of not only helping create leaders that are going to address some of the societal challenges that are waiting for us all, but also in helping the college become more creative at how it does that. So this is such a small group. I'd like to keep this really informal. So I have some remarks. I'll torture you with a few slides, because that's what we do at Verizon. But please, as I'm going along here, if you have some questions, stop me. I'd rather make this much more of a conversation as opposed to me just sort of lecturing at you. And what I'd like to talk about, I was really interested to hear the presentations yesterday regarding how some of you and some of your colleagues are engaging in social entrepreneurship, and the sort of the variety of projects and the diversity of settings was really interesting. What I would like to share with you is that it's also possible to engage in this kind of creative activity inside of a large Fortune 20 business, which is essentially what I look at myself as a change maker, or as my boss calls me, as an agitator, to try and change the culture to move forward and address some of these issues as well. So that's the perspective that I'm going to present to you, and obviously I'm going to talk to you about our strategy and why we think that we're relevant, and please, I welcome your questions as we go along. So to start off, just a little, sort of the obligatory commercial. If you don't know who Verizon is, I know that we sold all of our landline assets in Vermont and all of northern New England, for that matter, to Fairpoint. So you don't know us as a landline company anymore. You probably know us as Verizon Wireless, the largest provider of wireless service in the U.S. That's a domestic property. We are not international on the wireless side. We obviously also provide wireline services in states other than Vermont, and our premier product is Fios, which is a fiber optic based service. It has some of the fastest internet connections in the world. What you may not know is we're a global IP company. Roughly half of the world's internet traffic runs on our networks around the globe. So that's a big property. So obviously we have a lot of employees, over 192,000 employees. That's sort of my challenge, to help change the culture in terms of this orientation. Significant investment, about over $16 billion a year. You may not know that over the last 5 years that we've invested more money more capital investment than any other corporation on the planet. So, you think of ExxonMobil and some of these other big extractive companies as really investing. Well, we've actually done more than they have. We have a pretty good foundation, on somewhere between $66 and $70 million a year in grants, and I'll talk a little bit about how that's changing. So what the challenge for us is, and what I really want to talk to you about is, obviously we've done some things well to get us to where we are today. However, we are not getting the return on the investment that we've made in these 3 network platforms that we would like to get, and that we know that we need to get in order to sustain our business as we go forward. So we can't just continue to sort of push devices and sell the next iPhone and the next iPad or the other tablets that are out there. It can't be about products. We know we need to really begin to think about solutions and how do you leverage this investment to get us into new market areas that, quite frankly, we're not very strong at today. So this, for us, is very much a growth strategy. We're an infrastructure company, right? We invest in big networks that are there for long periods of time. So we're investing for the long term. Our stock is not traditionally the kind of stock that's held, by someone that's looking to make a quick win. It's a long-term investment, and quite frankly, these solutions that we're investing in are also long-term investments. And this is where we see, this is the growth of our business. This is where we're going. So what was really interesting, what sort of galvanized this approach, and hopefully some of you have seen this, we've followed over the course. Last year, Professor Michael Porter at Harvard and Mark Kramer at FSG wrote this article on how to fix capitalism and this whole notion of shared value creation. It was actually a follow-up to an article that they had written in 2006 that talked about this notion that, as we've moved through, this last, economic downturn over the last 4 years, I think that there is a greater realization and there are stronger expectations, quite frankly, coming from the generation that is here at Middlebury and around the world, that the role of business in society is fundamentally changing and has to fundamentally change. It is no longer acceptable for a corporation to exploit the resources of any nature that are available to it and then pass all that value on exclusively to its shareholders. That's not a sustainable business model. Quite frankly, it's not sustainable because you're never going to get the license to continue to operate that way. You have to start to factor in the community issues and how you can address them and really begin to elevate sort of the societal value proposition that a corporation can deliver and integrate that with the business value. That's sort of capitalism 2.0. And what I think is really interesting, and John, I don't know if this is something that you guys talk about, but this notion that Porter and Kramer have about the best corporate citizens are those that figure out how to apply their core competencies to some social challenges that are out there in the world and create innovative products and services that generate value for the shareholders and the communities. I don't want to suggest to you that we have this all figured out. We don't. We're just starting to do it. But this is the conversation that's going on in our company, and this is what we want to be known for. We believe, not only does this create the financial and the social value, but it also, builds trust and reputation and supports our license to operate. So this is our framework. So now let me take this, and this isn't my work. There's someone in our office who's really good with graphics and so forth. Let me say this to you in a different way. So what we call what Porter and Kramer call share value, we call it shared success. Okay, and I'm going to explain to you what that means. So the first part of it is it's a realization that we don't have all the answers and we can't be so internally focused. It's really by looking at the needs of the community that we can begin to understand where there are opportunities to leverage our wireless, our wireline, and our global IP networks to create solutions that solve problems. So in order to do that, you have to talk to the different stakeholders. You talk to the people in the education community. You talk to the healthcare community. You talk to the environmental community. Try and understand what their issues are and bring that back, because those social challenges create the opportunities for us to innovate and really repurpose and reconceive the kinds of products and services that we operate. So it's this outside-in strategy. In some respects, it's perhaps my generation will recognize this. I mentioned this before, Elizabeth. It's the Willy Loman strategy, right? Willy Loman went to the bank and he robbed the bank because that's where the money is. What I would suggest, we're a for-profit corporation. We still have a fiduciary duty to our shareholders. The money is in meeting these needs, so that's why we're looking there. So as we do it, there are two important things that are associated with this. The first is, on the left-hand side, Verizon is an engineering company, and for us, what gets measured gets managed. You have to operationalize it or it's not going to get done, and everything has to be done consistent with our values. So where shared success comes from, our new CEO has what he calls the Verizon Credo. And there's a line in it that says, we are good corporate citizens and we share our success with the community to make the world in which we operate better than what it was yesterday. So that is sort of how we're operationalizing or internalizing this notion of shared value. It's part of our values, who we see ourselves in the community. We know that our networks can help make connections that can enable people to communicate, whether it's for a business reason, a social reason, a personal reason, and improve the fabric of that community. So this is about continuing to do that, and this notion of key performance indicators is integrating it into, if you will, the Verizon way of doing things, our engineering culture. How do we make sure that this is institutionalized so it's not something that we do for one or two things, but eventually it's just the way we operate. It's sort of our DNA. On the right-hand side, it might not be as easy to see. It's about, the first thing in blue, it's about partnerships. This isn't meant to be political in any sense, red and blue, and selected for any reason. So partnerships is, we see ourselves as a facilitator and an enabler, right? The problems that face society today are too large for any one institution, whether it be the business community at large, never mind just Verizon, the policymakers, the academics, the NGOs. So what we're looking for is, we provide the connectivity, but we want the hardware people, that create devices that can take advantage of this network platform, and we want the software guys, the people that develop the apps and the programs and so forth. We want them all to innovate collaboratively with us using our platform to achieve, some social goals and meet these challenges. So that's what that piece is about. And then the philanthropy piece is, as I mentioned, we have a large foundation, $70 million a year. It used to be we gave grants. I mean, they were strategic. We looked at issues that we cared about, education. We looked at healthcare. But we're changing the focus of our foundation to be more of an incubator. So what that means is we are not only going to give our dollars, but we're also going to give our technology, and we're going to take it to places where our business is not initially looking at. So they may not see a huge market in an underserved community to address children's health issues, for example. But what our foundation is going to do is work with partners in that area, sort of incubate some results, and then we want to bring that back to the business to say, hey, you know what? We think that there might be a larger market opportunity here for us to pursue. So there's this very strong entrepreneurial incubation role that our foundation is looking to serve within the business. So then you get to sort of the guts of it. This is the machine. This is how we're trying to make this all work. And I think the most important point here is, as I mentioned before, for us, what gets measured gets managed. We obviously have done something right to have $110 billion worth of revenue on an annual basis. So we understand the financial side, right? We know markets. We know how to generate revenue. The challenge associated with this shared success approach is, at the same time, we're conceiving the financial benefits, we need to think about what are the social benefits. And we need to integrate them and raise them up so that they're considered at the same level. So ultimately, my ideal scenario would be, 3 or 5 years down the road when the marketeers come, to the CFO looking for money to support a business case, they have to demonstrate that they've considered both sides of the equation, right? The corporation is responsible both for generating financial as well as the social value. What are the social metrics? And if my social metrics are stronger than my colleagues' social metrics, then the company ought to invest in that product line because it's going to create more shared value. And do we know how to do that right now? No. But that's what we're working on. That's where we aspire to go. And why? Well, why is if we do this right? If we can simultaneously generate both the financial and the societal value, we're going to take care of the shareholders. They're going to continue to invest in us because they get the return that they're looking for and they get their dividends. Obviously, the communities are going to be very interested in coming to us and helping us identify new opportunities for product innovation that we're not going to think of on our own. So that increases revenue, that increases societal value because they get products that help them. And then you get into this whole issue of license to operate. This trust and brand value is like currency. Whether you're dealing with a policymaker, that you're trying, we've got some policy issues associated with our healthcare products, right? Some of them are associated with wireless devices, and the FDA views them as medical devices, and they want to regulate that. We don't necessarily think that's the right thing. We want to have some currency with them so that they understand and are supportive of our business model, right? We want to have currency with the community. We want to be able to continue to have cell towers in communities to provide services. You've probably read those issues can be somewhat controversial. So we have to demonstrate to them that there's a social value for that and that we're willing to work with them. And then obviously we also have to demonstrate financial value, sort of for the capital markets, so that people continue to invest in us. So in a nutshell, this is our model. This is how we, you can sort of, set this to music, sort of a little train that could sort of chug along. This is how we want to create value in the future. And what I'd like to take you through is sort of take it from abstract and make it a little more concrete and demonstrate some of the products. Before I go, any questions here? Any pushback? You would think I'm crazy? Please.
Yeah, you're talking about people coming to you guys, but what are the channels? Are you guys reaching out to them directly and sending your people into schools and stuff like that? Or are you hiring consulting firms to do the middle work? Or kind of how does that work?
So we do, so as I've learned in Washington, you have to have a large stakeholder community and cultivate relationships there. So I think we're particularly adept at doing that. We do it a variety of ways. We do it through our foundation, they make partnerships, with our grantees and so forth. But we also have things like we have a consumer advisory board that has representatives of a lot of national organizations that represent different constituencies. Whether they could be women's groups, they could be African American groups, Hispanic groups, the senior organizations, so they provide us a lot of feedback. We have a sustainability roundtable where we engage with environmental organizations to get their input. As a matter of fact, I don't know if you guys, I meant to ask, John, do you use the CACP has a campus carbon calculator?
Yeah. Yes, we do.
Okay, so CAPC, Adam Markin, he's on our sustainability roundtable, and we provided a grant to help take that from a spreadsheet to an online. So these are the kinds of things we're trying to get, round up the ideas and get people to talk to us about what the problems are and how we can help.
And so then from that kind of ground level, it comes up to you guys in your department. People are kind of sifting through those ideas and bringing them to you? Or
well, it comes into us. It also comes into the sort of the marketing side of the business as well. Yes. So we're trying to infuse, right? It can't be us thinking that we have the solution, right? We want that outside perspective.
Chris is a Middlebury brand. We're happy to hear that product that Adam brought further along started here.
Really?
2 students.
He did not mention that to me, so that makes me feel even better about it. All right. So I pushed hard for that. I'm quite confused.
You're on the right side on that.
That's great. That's great to know. Okay. So let's make this a little more concrete. So there are, so if I were to boil it down, and John sort of read this a little bit, for us it's all about, how do we leverage the transformational value of not only our products and technology, but our 192,000 employees, and motivate them towards creating this long-term value for our shareholders while addressing, the critical needs of the community. That's what we're all about. And the way we look at it, we have sort of 3 areas of focus, and this is what I'll talk about. On the left-hand side, we have solutions. It's all about creating products and services that, on the energy side, information communication technology, wireless technology is going to be the engine that runs the smart grid. It's going to run smart building systems. It's going to run smart transportation systems, telematics. I'm going to talk about that. If you look at on the healthcare side, we have products that we're going to be rolling out regarding mHealth, mobile health, that runs over a wireless network. You think about things like electronic medical records, right? Secure records. Those are the kinds of core competencies that we have based on our work with the financial institutions, our work with the government in terms of moving information securely. We see that as opportunity. It's also making sure that devices are accessible, right? So that, if you have a physical disability, if you're blind or you're deaf, you still should be able to use one of our devices and participate in the information economy. That's a strong focus for us. So that's sort of the solutions orientation. How do we take products and how do we innovate with them to create solutions to address challenges in these areas? On the philanthropy side, it's the same thing. I mentioned this notion of incubation. We're trying to focus on education, healthcare, and sustainability to begin with. Healthcare is the one that's advanced the furthest, and that's what I'm going to talk about. And then finally, I think we'd be remiss to say, as a responsible corporate citizen, we have to make sure that we have our own house in order. So that means how we run our business has to be done in a sustainable way. And our environmental impact, quite frankly, we use 10 billion kilowatts of electricity a year to run our networks, right? So we need to be responsible in thinking about ways to reduce that footprint. We have the 3rd largest private fleet in the country, right? Lots of fuel, lots of emissions. We have to address those kinds of issues as well, and a long supply chain.
It's just interesting, I mentioned this to you when we talked about the following, because if you look at the 3 categories of philanthropy, those are 3 of the most exciting areas for students on campus right now. And I think it's because they're complex. They matter now. Yes. So if you ask some random students, where's some excitement in ed studies, environmental studies, I'm happy to say, and it's because these are the complex challenges.
Right.
So it's just Did you all, can I just ask them, did it take you time to narrow down those 3, or was it?
Actually, they really popped
They were
pretty quickly.
Okay.
It was, the education is something that we've been doing for a very long time. It's, we recognize our foundation had this program called Infinity.org, which was an online learning platform. So we had already been in that space, and we knew that bringing the internet into the classroom could really enrich in terms of multimedia experience that. So we were already involved with that, so that was pretty easy. And the healthcare stuff was, we recognize, if you look at the aging population and the projections in terms of the revenues that are going to be associated with that industry, the money that was going to be invested, and quite frankly, the fact that people were looking for secure ways to communicate, which is what we do. That's our bread and butter. Looking to create electronic medical records and do things remotely. That sort of rose. I think the sustainability or the energy efficiency one is the one that is going to take a little bit more. We're a little further behind on that, but trying to catch up. And I'm going to talk about one example. We bought this company called Hughes that's really big into telematics and for fleets and so forth. They've got a really cool product. So just on the energy side, here's if you only take one factoid away from what I say today, please take this one. This one just, it drives me nuts. So I have a good friend, his name's Skip Leitner, former U.S. EPA economist. He just left an organization called the American Council for an Energy Efficient Economy, and he's off on his own. And he educated me to the fact that our economy is only 14% energy efficient. Let me say that another way. That means 86% of the energy, think of all the fossil fuel that we extract and prepare to different kinds of fuels, that gets wasted. That is just, to me, that is like criminal, right? You know, we have all these arguments about we need to, to drill more, we need to get more renewable energy, which I agree with, into the system. But Leitner talks about we could meet, Obama talked about by 2020, at one point he wanted to reduce carbon emissions in this country by about 80% to meet a Kyoto goal if we ever went in that direction. Well, we could get 50% of that if we were just more efficient with the energy that we're using now. That is the biggest opportunity there, but no one talks about it. So I would implore you to figure out a way to increase this number, like over the last 50 years, I think 50 years ago it was like at 8%. So you think about with all the technology that's out there now, it's only risen to 14%. So if you guys could figure out a way to get this to 30% or 40%, which is still pretty anemic, it would be huge. So I'll leave that challenge with you.
Do you know where most of, obviously some energy uses are going to be more wasteful than others? What are like the top 30%?
Well, some of it's in, so part of it's in the generation of the energy. A lot of it is wasted in terms of it is sort of expelled as heat and never gets used for a productive purpose. And you think about the way our grid works, right? The energy has to be transmitted a long way before it's actually used because no one wants to live next door to a nuclear plant or a coal plant or something like that. So there's a significant amount of energy that's lost in the transmission. So it leaves the factory, but it never gets to the user.
So it's more like domestic and industrial use rather than transportation.
Well, there's some of that too. I mean, the internal combustion engine, right, is not the most energy efficient way to use. So basically, in our entire economy, there are many points where the energy is not used productively. That's what his point is. And if we, there are ways that we can improve that. And that ought to be, I don't hear any of the candidates talking about that. Quite frankly, that's where I wish we were investing more money. I think it would be more productive faster than, quite frankly, looking at solar or wind. So anyways, it's interesting. Verizon's a member of a group called GESI, the Global E-Sustainability Initiative. And 8 years ago, we commissioned McKinsey and the Boston Consulting Group to study the role of information communication technology. So think of it, hardware companies, Cisco, they make routers and so forth. All of the information service providers like Verizon, BT, Deutsche Telekom around the globe, and all the software companies as well. You can think of Microsoft, think of Google. And looked at, so what is the role that our sector can play in reducing carbon emissions around the globe? And what the study determined is that globally about 2% of carbon emissions are associated with our industry, right? So that means certainly we have a responsibility. We need to make sure our data centers are more energy efficient. We need to make sure that our switching stations are as efficient as they are. We need to give you devices that are really efficient. So we have a role to play. But what they found, which is really astounding, is, and we're just updating this, there's a new version of this that's going to come out in December. In 2008, the study found that about 15% of global emissions could be reduced by applying information communication technology to making them smarter. The number has now actually grown. It's up to about 17%. while our footprint has stayed the same. So we still have the 2% responsibility, but we can enable a 17% improvement. So I like to call this is like looking, do you want to look at the forest or you want to look at the trees, right? There are a lot of people that like to look at the trees, and they'll look at data centers, and do data centers use a lot of energy? Yes, they do, but there's a multiplier here, right? That 2% enables 17% emission reduction. So obviously from our perspective, we believe that more investment in these technologies is going to generate more energy efficiency, and specifically in areas like making grids smarter, right? If you take, a smart grid is nothing other than taking what today is a dumb system whereby the electric company has no idea how much information is flowing across its network to your home, nor do they know when your power goes out. That's why you always have to call them to let them know it's out. If you overlay an information communication technology stream on top of that, they can have real-time information regarding everything that's going on in that system. And as a matter of fact, if a line gets cut, they would then be able to reroute, right? There would be some redundancy that they could build in, so that they could continue to provide services to customers. So we think this is a big market opportunity for us, a big social opportunity for us as well, because it's also necessary to integrate renewables. Solar, wind, this all has to be done in a balanced fashion. When the wind's blowing, you may want to turn off the coal plant. You need information in order to achieve that balance. The other thing is, and I'm going to talk about road transportation, but smart buildings, the ability to be able to manage a building and understand what's happening external to the building and internal to the building, and balance that so that as you heat and cool, you use the least amount of energy. That's what a smart building system is all about. And then the last area that they looked at was travel substitution. So that would be, instead of skipping the meeting, I skip the trip and I participate on a video conference network or a teleconference network. So what are we doing in this area? Just two examples. The first one is, and I'll emphasize again, remember I talked about enablement and partnerships. We're not doing this by ourselves. This project called Envision Charlotte is in concert with Duke Energy, who's the provider in Charlotte, North Carolina, IBM, and the city of Charlotte. And what the notion is here is it's beginning to try and educate people to be smarter consumers of energy and be able to make smarter decisions about how they do it. So here's the notion. Think about it. Supposing you went into the grocery store, go shopping, and there were no prices there whatsoever. So you took your carriage, you went all the way around, you got everything that you wanted, and then it was only once you got to the cash register that you had any idea how much money you had just spent. Well, that's the way the energy world works today, right? You get a bill at the end of the month for how much you've used. Over time, obviously, you have a sense as to what the bill should be during different times of the year, but you have no idea how much of that was to power your TV or your son's Xbox or the refrigerator or the lights. It's completely opaque to you. So what this begins to do is, in about 70 buildings in Charlotte, using our network, our wireless network gathers information from sensors that are in the buildings regarding how energy is being used, and then this energy is now displayed to the residents in those buildings along with tips as to how they can be smarter, more savvy energy consumers. And the goal of this, what they've done is, so for this downtown urban corridor, what they said is, by the year 2016, they want a 20% reduction. And quite frankly, the first year results are just starting to come out, and they're seeing that the overall energy demand has dropped. And in talking with the residents of these buildings, what they're saying is, it's because they have this mindset. It's almost like it's like if you've ever driven a Prius, it's that if you constantly have information flashing at you, telling you, how you're doing, you change your driving habits to be more energy efficient. That's what these people are doing. Here's another example. This is about telematics, and this is this company I mentioned. We acquired Hughes, which has a small subsidiary called Network Fleet. And what they do is they put sensors on vehicles that enable, they're tied directly to the onboard, an engine is nothing but a computer these days as well. They tie right into the onboard diagnostic network, and over the wireless network, you not only get GPS connectivity, so in this case, this Eastern Municipal Water District in California, right, they have a fleet of 350 vehicles that are responsible for maintaining the water system for the community. So supposing somebody on the other side of town, all of a sudden, their water shuts off at their home. This system enables the water district to instantly know where every vehicle is, and they can now route the vehicle that's closest to that home, so that it's done in a more fuel-efficient way as opposed to sending someone halfway across town to get there. That's one of the benefits. The other thing is, in most states, you have emissions testing that goes on. Some of them do it on an annual basis. Some of them do it on a biannual basis. Well, think about it. That's just a snapshot in time. So if it's every 2 years, I could have my emissions tested today. Tomorrow, something could happen. And for the next 2 years, my vehicle is running in an inefficient fashion, generating more carbon emissions, and I don't even know about it. Well, this does it on a daily basis. And so now, as soon as they get a signal that something's out of whack with that engine, they can bring it back in and they can fix it, reducing the profile of the emissions associated with it. And some of this stuff's really interesting, right? Because now you get into some policy issues. You get this embedded base of inspection stations that make revenue doing this testing. They don't want to have anything to do with this because we're going to take business away from them. But in the long run, what's better for the environment? So this generates some of the policy discussions that we get involved with, because in many respects our technology is sort of the insurgent into this market. We're going to change the way people do things, and loath to those that try and do that, right? So you can see over the first 6 months, with these capabilities, the ability to dispatch more effectively, the ability to run and operate more effectively, they've reduced their mileage, they've reduced their fuel costs, they've been able to deploy people in more productive ways. That's where the labor costs, saved labor costs come in, and obviously they've put less carbon emissions into the environment. So let me switch gears for a minute and talk about healthcare. So think about, lots of people in this country are dealing with chronic health issues, right? You might have asthma, you might have diabetes. You think about the care models today, they involve, visits to doctor's offices where tests are done, and sort of the same thing as my vehicle example. Once you leave the doctor's office, that doctor doesn't really have any information regarding what's going on in your system until you come back in again. Well, what we're looking at is mobile health, and basically taking, I don't have my device on me, but take my iPhone, and now you can make this a medical device. You can attach a device that would enable, to do a pulmonary test on a patient. They can blow into it. There's information that can be instantly uploaded over the wireless network to a caregiver. You can do glucose monitoring remotely. That information gets instantly uploaded. You can do other biometric information, and what the studies demonstrate is that patients that are exposed to this level of care, where on a regular basis a caregiver can monitor what's going on in their physical system, if you will, and then they can intervene when they see abnormalities much quicker than the current model, where it's only between these short episodic visits to the doctor. What you find is, number one, you find patients more engaged in their own health care, right? I mean, some of it may be, they have a prescription that they're not taking on a regular basis. Now they can see the benefit of adhering to whatever prescription has been provided, and you get the clinicians who can intervene before things become so severe that someone needs to go to an emergency room or someone needs to be hospitalized. So overall, we think that there are cost benefits associated with this, but there are also quality of life benefits associated with this. So then there's another example of this. This is a trial that we're doing with a healthcare provider called WellPoint. Similarly, it's using the mobile device, but it's using the video capabilities. High definition video, where now, basically at any time of day, you could literally have a conversation with your doctor. It's like Skyping with your doctor. It's probably the best way that in your context, you would understand that. And it gives you, if you look at the value proposition, some of the same benefits, right? It enables issues to be addressed before they become, more chronic or more catastrophic and require a higher level of more expensive care. And quite frankly, it also enables people, think about a senior that's fiercely independent, that wants to continue to be independent. These kinds of devices can help them continue to live that independent type of lifestyle. So these are the areas that we're looking at. So healthcare is the one that's moved the fastest, and there are 2 product sets that we're going to be introducing in early 2013. The way we're thinking about it is the business has business cases for mHealth, which is sort of this virtual care and remote disease management. There's also a product that looks at fraud in the healthcare system. So think of Medicare. There are algorithms and software that we can provide that can help identify fraudulent activity before it gets paid. And believe me, this is big money. We're talking billions of dollars a year. If you could take that out of the system, think of how much more productively that money could be invested to improve the quality of care and get care to people that, in rural areas and so forth that need it. So these are funded. And the conversation that we've had with the business, and what I started off with, is we do not want to just think about sort of the left-hand side of the ledger, the business side. It's important to figure out revenue and market share, and we sort of plotted out between now and 2016 what our market share and what our revenue might be. But at the same time, we're trying to integrate in some of these societal values, right? How do you, cost is one thing, right? That's probably the easiest piece of a social metric, because that's quantifiable. But what about these qualitative kinds of things? How do these products improve a patient and asthmatic's quality of life, right? We don't have an answer to this. This is the challenge that we're taking on right now, because in our portfolio, in our business process, we want to make sure that the business is considering this right-hand side of the ledger at the same time as it considers the financial side of the ledger. So it's integrated, it works together, and the business case has to have both of them. This is how you create shared value. It's financial, it's social, and it's got to be part of the equation. It's the full equation. So we're working in these areas. We're looking at quality of care. We're looking at access to physicians. We're looking at security of information. HIPAA compliance is a big deal. You can't just take someone's personal, private medical information and transmit it on an email. You're violating their privacy rights there. So you have to have a platform for doctors and patients and insurance companies to communicate securely, and this is our core competency, right? We do this for financial institutions, we do it for the Department of Defense. We want to apply it here because we know we can create shared value. That's the goal. So I guess I want to leave you with this great quote by Keynes, right? It's not the new ideas. It's opening up your mind to them and sort of getting rid of the old ideas that are going to help these things take root. And that's the challenge. That's the challenge. That is sort of my social entrepreneurship challenge, if you will, inside of Verizon. This is new. When I show up, not everyone embraces me with open arms and says, "Oh, thank God you're here." Right? It's in some cases it's a pain in the ass is here. What's he going to make us try and do this time? So it's really trying to institutionalize this.
So I need to go prepare for my next class, which is still at So thanks, and I know there'll be some Q&A, so this has been so great.
All right, well, thank you.
Yeah, and we'll see you soon.
Yes.
All right, great.
Talk to you.
All right, see you. All right, thanks.
So what do you, I'm going to pull up a chair here, and I'd love to hear what you think.
Let me start with that. One of the scariest training comes I've ever seen is one that Tom Peters, the business writer, is on,
Yes.
about thriving on chaos and so on and so forth. And he starts with the Fortune 100 companies in 1950, and 92% of them are gone. And he just explodes the names on the screen, so you see company after company after company that was huge and successful gone. And we talked about Kodak, gone. And this comes to this idea about innovation and entrepreneurship. And it's my own belief that the attitude of entrepreneurship is even more important within organizations than maybe in creating new ones. And the organizations that don't allow it to happen or can't figure out what to do or don't have the people are going to go in that same 92% dustbin.
Mm-hmm.
But what's the formula? That distinguishes an IBM from a Kodak. How much of it is the leadership? How much of it is the culture? How much of it is the people within the organization? How do individuals, regardless of the culture and the leadership, manage to bring innovation into larger organizations? I think a lot of the concern, among middle school students is it's such a pain to have to fight these big bureaucracies. So.
That's a great question. I won't profess to have the answer to it, right? Because this is every organization's unique. I think IBM's a great example in the sense that they've reinvented themselves, right? When I was here, IBM was they made mainframe computers, Big Blue, and they sold you the next big.
Really big.
Yeah, really big. Right? It would take up
Yeah.
take up this whole floor,
This
right?
whole-
And then they got into laptops, and they don't do any of that anymore. They're all about professional services and solutions, and I think it's a great example of, it's really hard, and I know like in business schools, they talk a lot about strategy and what got you to where you are today as the environment changes is not necessarily the formula for success in the future. And you have to think about how you're going to reinvent yourself. And that's essentially what we're trying to do here, right? We've invested a ton of money. That FiOS investment alone was in I think it's 18 states, it's like $23 billion to build that network. Now that we have it, we have to figure out, yes, we have revenue from video and we have revenue from the internet, but where's the next revenue? In the long term, where's the growth going to be? And how do you get at that? And this is a growth strategy for us. It's looking long term, and I think, to Charlie's point, the companies that are successful at figuring out how they need to change to adapt, to find their new revenue sources are the ones that are still around. And the ones that are in the dustbin are the ones that, they got stuck in the old business model and the world changed around them. It's hard. It's really hard.
I'm hoping you'll be willing to elaborate a little bit more specifically on some of the challenges you discussed at the end of the lecture. You said sometimes you go into rooms and people are not always happy to see you there. So I wanted to see if you might be willing to talk a little bit more specifically about what are the main criticisms people have, just within Verizon and then within the business industry, of when you pitch these ideas and projects that are grounded more in social values.
I think part of it is the question earlier about inside out and outside in. We feel pretty strongly that we understand our business and we understand our products. And, you know, at times it's difficult for us to take input from outside the business, right, in terms of how that could be adapted to be used better. So there's a certain level of resistance associated with that in terms of becoming more comfortable in engaging outside to figure that out. That's one piece of it. The other piece is that, you know, this is really foreign, right? It's really easy. They're very accustomed to figuring out, you know, when they put a business plan together, they have to put together a revenue and an expense projection, and they've been, you know, trained to do that and been doing it very successfully for a number of years. Now all of a sudden we come along and start talking about, well, where are the social metrics associated with that? It's like, you speak in Greek. What do you mean? I don't understand that. So it's 192,000 people that are accustomed to doing things in a certain way for a long period of time. You know, there are lots of analogies about turning around an aircraft carrier, all those kinds of things. It's just there's a lot of inertia in the system, and it's hard to get them to think about it. That's why I think what we're trying to do is, the ideal scenario is you can't do this all at once. Well, every product, right, you got to do this. I mean, that would just be a recipe for disaster. If we could find, and this is what we're trying to do with these couple of products, find a way to have some success so that they can see it works. And quite frankly, if you think about it, so if I'm the Verizon wireless account executive and I'm trying to sell to Porter Hospital, think about the social metrics that I had up there. If I had those in my back pocket and I walked into the hospital and said, you know, if you buy my machine, you know, my mHealth solution here, this wireless solution, you're going to increase the quality of care, you're going to reduce the amount of emergency room visits, you know, maybe you reduce the hospital duration of a diabetic or something like that. Those are the kinds of things that the hospital is willing to pay for, right? So part of it is, it's like you gotta show them, right? Work with the data. It can't be abstract. It's going to be very concrete. Have some data to go in there, and I think it's going to start to build on itself, and that's what we're trying to do. So the other piece of it is, quite frankly, and this has to go more to sort of our economic system in general, it's this short-term focus, right? I mean, every quarter, you got to meet your numbers or exceed your numbers, or you get hammered, right? If you're managing to that every day, it's really hard to look over the horizon and try and do this. And that's why they're reluctant to do it, because they have to meet those numbers, right? That's an absolute. And in some respects, this could be perceived as a distraction. You know? So you have to, it's a balance. It's hard. That's why it's hard. So that's why they're not always. So I try not to take it personally. Please.
So you talked about like trust and brand value in the beginning. I'm just curious, like in your marketing, whether it's acquisition or is this like communications to existing customers, does your like social purpose have a role in any of that marketing? Do you feel like consumers are at a point where they're like swayed one way or the other based on like all the stuff they've been doing?
That's a really interesting question, because we're about to change our entire approach. Up until this point, we have not really talked about any of our corporate responsibility attributes, if you will. Our focus, like think about our marketing campaigns. They've all been about products. Can you hear me now? Right? We had another one, rule the air and so forth. It's all been about the attributes of our particular product and what that product does. And it was nothing really about, you know, our values or how we approach it. You will see, so in our industry in January, the Consumer Electronics Show is sort of the big kickoff event. It's very early in January. I think it's like January 3rd. You'll start to see some different messaging from us, from Lloyd our new CEO, that begins to talk about the shared success solution orientation and, you know, really reinforcing that license to operate, that that reputational value that we need in order to continue to move forward. So So in answer to your question, I don't know because we've never done that before, but I'm damn excited that we're going to start to do it now. It's going to really help.
See a Super Bowl ad in the future.
So, you know, I don't know whether we're going to spend that kind of money, but you will see some ads. There will be some video, there will be some print and so forth. So it's coming. Jay?
I had a question about the new healthcare, the kind of Skyping with your doctor method. It sounds familiar to a couple of different projects I've heard about abroad. Are there possibilities for collaboration or sharing the resources and kind of technologies you have abroad, or learning from them? I don't really know the project specifically, but it sounds like you have all these things going on.
I mean, certainly I think that that's an opportunity. Right now we're a bit constrained in that our wireless business is a domestic business, so we don't operate outside the U.S. But I know our foundation is certainly starting to look at some international partnerships to do these kinds of things, maybe in collaboration with Vodafone is a partner with us on the wireless business. They own 45% of that business, so they operate in a lot of the developing markets and are looking at some of these things. So that's a possibility.
Can you speak to the foundation and how that's realigning to this goal?
Sure. So I mentioned, so what the foundation is right there. So on the solution side, we're looking at healthcare is first. We're looking at energy efficiency, and we're also looking at education. So what we want the foundation to be a strategic partner in advancing the business interest and the social interest in that area. So I talked about this a little bit about this role of incubation. What the foundation is doing traditionally in the past, it was only about making grants and providing money. We are now actually going to provide our technology as well. So say for mHealth, there are underserved communities that our marketing plans do not envision us serving initially. So what we're looking for the foundation to do is to partner with some NGOs. They're actually focused on children, they're focused on women, and they're focused on seniors. So it could be something like with visiting nurses in New York State, where we do a partnership with them, provide the devices and the connectivity, and do some of this, this video consulting. And the goal there is to have this be an incubator to figure out, what is the market opportunity associated with using these products to serve this community, and is that something that we could bring back to the business as something that we might want to invest more heavily in the future. So the philanthropy is intended to be very purposeful to really trial, to experiment with some things that the business wouldn't be able to take the risk to do, learn from that, and then figure out how to incorporate that into a business plan. That's how we're trying to approach this. Sure.
The example that you gave with the breakdown in Charlotte, North Carolina, where the residents could see the energy usage, that seems to me like an example of like something born out of like a social environment, but that has like consumer product application. Like, do you think that is the idea that could then become like a consumer product?
Yes. Well, I mean, and quite frankly, that provides a lot of the benefits that a smart grid would have. Mm-hmm. So we actually do have a product that we offer. It's called Home Monitoring and Control that runs over our broadband network that enables you to begin to understand which devices in your home. You get real-time information regarding how much energy the refrigerator uses versus the washing machine, and what they talk about in the future. And obviously, we're not the energy provider, right? But in the future, if you could get real-time information regarding how you're using energy in your home, and you also had real-time information regarding energy pricing, well, now you could start to make decisions, right? So on August 5th, when it's 100 degrees and 150% humidity outside, that might not be the best time, and everybody's got their air conditioner cranking. I don't want to run my discretionary device, my washing machine at that time. If I know that at 1 o'clock in the morning, energy prices are way down, then I can program the device to run that. So that helps the utility in terms of spreading demand out, right? So there's social utility associated with that. If they're able to spread demand out, maybe they don't have to bring, they have a coal-fired plant that's going to provide supplementary power that they don't have to turn on because the demand hasn't peaked or spiked there. And you as a consumer have social value because you can be a smarter consumer, and quite frankly, I'd rather spend much less money on electricity and more money on, I don't know, you name it, right? So that Envision Charlotte is, sort of think of that as sort of early stages of the benefits that a smart grid can deliver.
Who were you as a Middlebury student, and what were the experiences or learning that you took with you and that you think helped you the most to get where you are?
Well, I didn't have. Yes, I did not have the benefits that you're receiving through this Center for Social Entrepreneurship. Over the course of the last 24 hours that I've been here, that thought just keeps bouncing around in my head. Just think about how much more effective I could have been if I left here with the experience that you guys are having. The real world. Your colleagues yesterday that had the benefit of those grants and those projects and actually going out and trying into the real world and trying to affect change. That was not existent when I was here, right? I was a history major, right? I spent my senior year pretty much holed up in this building in a room that had no windows, writing.
But you did have an interesting junior year where you were actually ahead of what Middlebury was doing at that time.
Well, I did, yes.
Did you share that?
Yeah.
So my junior year, what I did is I combined. I was also a German. I was a double major. So my mother's German. That was actually the first language I spoke. So when I combined my winter term and my semester abroad, I went in January, and I actually did an oral history project where I got to interview, because of the history piece of it, right, their experiences during the war, because that really impacted, my mother's family, right, my grandmother, my uncles, and my mother. So that was a really cool experience. But when I left here, I went to work for New England Telephone because they offered me a good job. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I didn't think of myself as an entrepreneur or an intrapreneur. I didn't think of myself. You are being trained to be change makers, right? I knew that I wanted to have some impact on society, right? So that when my epitaph or at my funeral, somebody would have something positive to say that I affected some change. But I didn't have the skills or the experience. I didn't know how to do that. And I'm just thinking today in my job, if I had had the experiences that you're having here through this program, how much more effective I could be. So in that sense, and that's positive. That's progress, right? If 30 years later you were getting the same thing that I got, we'd still be dealing with the same problems, right? It wouldn't. So, Liz or Charlie,
You said it well.
that question is equally as applicable to you as it is to me.
I'll add what I said when we talked this morning. I think you learn to solve problems in groups. And that's the way the world works.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you're often at a Northeastern, you take the metro over and you just take your engineering class and go away, you don't have that. You don't develop those kinds of capabilities.
Right.
But learning how 5 people can make a whole greater than the individual parts and so on is a huge benefit after you leave it.
Right. It is. Yes. Well, and frankly was not part of the experience that we had. When I was here, we had small study groups, right? But everything was done individually. I took a test or I wrote a paper. You were graded on your individual performance. Because I think about how education's changed. Like when I was going through business school, we virtually did nothing individually. It was all a group that did it. And when I think about, my children now, I have a combination of college and high school. I mean, everything. I used to kid one of my daughters when she was in high school. It seemed to me like every 5 minutes, I asked her, do you go on eBay to find all these friends, these people that just show up periodically? They work on projects, and then it's a different project, and it's a different group of people, or whatever. I mean, that's the way of the world, right? I mean, in the business environment, I don't do anything by myself. My role is really to persuade and cajole groups of others that I don't have. It's a flat organization, right? They're all. It's not like you're king and you get to dictate. All right, here's what we're doing today. It doesn't work that way, right? They got to figure out. In that sense, there's sort of shared value there too. What are they going to get? What am I going to get? What's the business going to get? And you have to be effective at that. So you're learning that.